Faith Reynolds had long been the embodiment of justice in her small Alabama town. As a respected magistrate judge, she was known for her sharp intellect, her unwavering commitment to fairness, and her ability to navigate even the most complex of legal cases. She held the respect of her peers and the admiration of her community. Her judgments were seen as the epitome of integrity. But behind her poised and immaculate image, Faith was hiding a secret, a dark and dangerous desire that threatened everything she had built. It began innocently enough. Faith was browsing her Facebook late one evening when her eyes landed on the profile of Caleb Foster. His name immediately brought back memories, a case she had presided over years ago. Caleb had been convicted of a brutal murder, a crime that had shocked the town. But now, there he was, his face barely visible in the blurry prison yard photo, a reminder of a past long forgotten. With a mix of professional curiosity and something more, Faith clicked on his profile, and so began a twisted web of lies, manipulation, and obsession. At first, their conversations were simple exchanges about his case and her role as a judge. But Caleb was no ordinary inmate. He was a man skilled in the art of persuasion, and he quickly began to charm Faith, making her feel noticed, desired, and understood in ways her husband Mark no longer could. Caleb's words had a magnetic pull. "You're brilliant," he would tell her. "You're different from everyone else." Those words lingered in Faith's mind long after their exchanges ended, filling a void in her heart she hadn't even realized existed. It was easy at first to dismiss it as harmless, just casual conversation between an inmate and a former judge. But the connection between them deepened with each passing day. Caleb's messages grew more intimate, more flirtatious, until it became clear to Faith that she had become part of a dangerous game. Caleb, however, wasn't interested in casual chat. He wanted to break Faith down, piece by piece, and it didn't take long before she began to question everything in her life. As Faith's obsession with Caleb intensified, so too did the cracks in her seemingly perfect marriage. Mark Reynolds, the devoted police officer and father, had always been the dependable, selfless husband. He was the rock in their relationship, the one who supported her career, their family, and their shared values. But now, in Faith's eyes, he had become an obstacle, a man who could never give her the excitement and passion Caleb promised her. His steady love, his unwavering support seemed dull in comparison to the fire Caleb ignited in her. She began to stay up late at night, long after Mark had gone to bed, texting Caleb and pouring her soul into the conversations. Mark noticed her growing distance, but chalked it up to the stress of her demanding job. Yet Faith's neglect of their family life deepened as she hid behind her professional image, pretending everything was fine, while, in reality, she was slipping further into Caleb's grip. She started to believe that her life could be different, that she deserved something more, something thrilling, something free of the constraints of marriage and responsibility. Caleb, for his part, knew exactly how to manipulate Faith. He told her that her life was suffocating, that she deserved more than the monotony of her everyday existence. He made her believe that she was special, unique, someone who had the power to break free from the shackles of her current life. "We could have everything," he promised. "We could be unstoppable together." His words were intoxicating, and the more Faith listened, the more she was drawn to the idea of a life with Caleb, a life where she was finally free from Mark and everything that held her back. The idea of leaving Mark, of starting anew with Caleb, became a fantasy she could no longer ignore. And then Caleb planted a seed. He suggested that perhaps Mark was the only thing standing in their way. The thought of removing him, of making a clean break, became increasingly tempting. At first, the idea of murder seemed unthinkable, something she could never consider, especially as a judge who had spent her career upholding the law. But Caleb's persistence was relentless. If you truly wanted him, Caleb told her, you would do whatever it took. You're stronger than this, he urged. You know what needs to be done. As the weeks passed, Faith began to entertain the unthinkable. Her late-night conversations with Caleb became more explicit, more manipulative, and Faith's resolve began to crumble. She was no longer just a judge. She was a woman lost in obsession, willing to do anything to feel the passion Caleb promised her. The line between fantasy and reality blurred, and when Caleb finally pushed her to take action, Faith found herself agreeing. "I'll do it," she typed, her hands trembling as she typed the words. "But it has to be perfect, no mistakes." With Caleb's encouragement, Faith began to plan. Every detail had to be flawless. There could be no room for error. She needed someone who could carry out the deed without raising suspicion. And that's when she turned to Mr. Harris, the well-respected school principal who had a secret side business. By day, Harris was a man of high integrity, shaping the minds of young students. But by night, he was a fixer, someone who could make problems disappear. Faith had heard whispers about his extracurricular activities, and she knew he was the person to help. The meeting took place in Faith's chambers under the guise of discussing a school safety initiative. Once the door was closed, Faith wasted no time. She was direct, cold, and calculated. "I have a situation I need handled," she said. Harris didn't flinch. He had heard these requests before. "Situations like this come with a price," he replied. "Money isn't an issue," Faith assured him. She promised him the firearms she had stolen from Mark's collection, along with a substantial payout once the job was done. Through Harris, Faith hired a hitman known only as D. He was an enigma, a man who worked in the shadows, carrying out contracts for those willing to pay. Faith gave D detailed instructions, using her legal expertise to anticipate every possible obstacle. She ensured that Mark's routine remained unchanged, so there would be no red flags when the deed was done. The plan was meticulous. At the right time, D would use one of Mark's stolen firearms to kill him. Faith provided D with videos of their home, showing him the security blind spots and the exact times when Mark would be alone. She even arranged for her car to be used in the crime, fabricating a receipt for repairs to cover the tracks. As the day of the murder approached, Faith's anxiety was palpable. She practiced her alibi, making sure every detail was covered. By day, she was the respectable judge. By night, she was a woman consumed by obsession, texting Caleb and preparing for the unthinkable. Caleb's words kept her going. "Once he's gone, it will be just us. No more waiting, no more hiding." The morning of the murder arrived like any other. Faith went through the motions with practiced ease, taking her children to the park while Dee carried out the plan. Mark was alone at home, unsuspecting, when Dee entered the house and shot him. The hitman wiped the scene clean and left without a trace. Meanwhile, Faith was at the park with her children, maintaining the image of the devoted mother. She kept checking her watch, waiting for the moment when everything would change. When they returned home, Faith's heart raced as she led her children into the house. The scene she had orchestrated was now in motion. Her children were oblivious to the horror that had unfolded in their home. As she entered the kitchen, she gasped in shock, her hands flying to her mouth in a perfect act of disbelief. She fell to her knees, pretending to mourn the loss of her husband, her tears flowing as she screamed for help. The police arrived, and Faith played her role flawlessly. She was the grieving widow, the woman who had lost the love of her life. Her story was airtight, and the children's corroboration of her tale made it seem even more convincing. Detective Clara Martinez, who had worked with Mark for years, was assigned to the case. As she began investigating, the initial assumption was that Mark had been killed in retaliation for his work as a police officer. But soon, small inconsistencies began to emerge, pointing toward Faith herself. The forensic investigation revealed that the bullets used in the murder had been stolen from Mark's personal collection. Faith had reported the firearms missing weeks before, claiming it was for her protection. But something about the way she had handled the report didn't sit right with Clara, and when the detective discovered that Faith had a life insurance policy on Mark worth over $500,000, things began to take a darker turn. Clara dug deeper into Faith's financial records and discovered that Faith had recently inquired about claiming the policy. This was highly unusual behavior for someone who had just lost her spouse. The investigation began to focus more and more on Faith, but Clara needed more than suspicion to make an arrest. Clara was relentless. The inconsistencies, the stolen firearms, the insurance policy, all pointed toward Faith. And the more Clara investigated, the clearer it became that Faith Reynolds was not the innocent, grieving widow she appeared to be. Her life, once a model of integrity, was a house of cards, built on lies and deceit, waiting to collapse. Faith thought she had gotten away with it, that her plan had been perfect. But Detective Clara Martinez was closing in, and the walls were beginning to close in around her.